This is the Greg Bedard Patriots Podcast with Nick Cattles.
This episode brought to you by Prizepicks, largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. Download the Prizepicks app today. Use code CLNS. Get $50 instantly when you play $5. Also, our friends at Notturno Home Services sponsoring this podcast. Of course, that's Greg's home comfort company. If you're looking for a team that puts your comfort first, visit notturnohome.com/Bedard for 10% off your next service. It could save you up to $1,000. We have a lot to get to, Mr. Bedard, but let's start with the Eliot Wolf media session yesterday. I know you did a podcast yesterday following said session. Anything you wanted to add, looking at it in the big picture, or maybe something you missed, just genuine feelings about what Wolf had to say?
Not really. I kind of wanted to take your temperature on this, Nick, because I just want to know how you feel about it, because I just think it's ridiculous, some of the overreaction that we're getting to this with final say. And and I heard Beetle was playing my podcast, I think today on the show. And, he's like, I am going to worry about it. Like, quit clutching your pearls. Quit being such a big baby, Beetle. For like the last year, all he's done is whine and moan about the Patriots and just relax. Daddy's home. Daddy's going to take care of it. They're going to be back to being a real franchise. I know you're frustrated, but can you stop stomping your feet and throwing temper tantrums for, I don't know, a day or so we can actually have some real football discussion. So that I was curious your thoughts on this whole line of discussion.
I thought it was mostly a nothing burger. The fact that Wolf said, ultimately, I have final say. Whether it's in his contract, and I read your read on it yesterday, did not catch the podcast you did, just so much to follow during Combine Week. But I did read your column this morning about your analysis from what he said. And you mentioned that it's in Eliot Wolf's contract that he has say, probably. And I know Mike Reese has said a similar thing. But I also just think it's the way I put it yesterday on my podcast, Greg, was it's to me, it's smoke and mirrors. The Patriots, yes, it's in Eliot Wolf's contract. But as you've mentioned before, we went through this last offseason. You have to register somebody within the NFL, to be that executive, to have the final say. And so Eliot Wolf is that guy on the paperwork. And I think aside from his contract, it's just easier for the Patriots to say, yeah, well, Eliot, look, if you're asked, if you're pressed, and by the way, he was asked 3 or 4 times. Great job by the media on the ground. Great job by Phil Perry, who, pressed him on it on the final say thing. But he knew he would likely have to answer that question if he was pressed. And I just think it's a situation where the Patriots don't want to open up the process. We've seen how they handled the head coaching searches, quote unquote. We've seen how they handled the GM thing last year with Wolf. I just don't think they want to open up that can of worms. And the easiest way to not have to go through a hiring process is keep Eliot Wolf's name on the paperwork with everybody behind closed doors, fully aware that Mike Vrabel has the hammer. And so I was not swayed in any way to think that Vrabel has less say because Eliot Wolf went out there and said, ultimately, I have the final say.
Right. I mean, do people really let's just explain it this way. Are there people really out there that think Eliot Wolf, first of all, they think he's a complete imbecile off of one offseason? It wasn't great. I do think the draft in the coming years will look better. I don't think it's as bad as people made it out to be. Not a lot of instant impact. We know that. Free agency was rough. It wasn't a total zero, but it was rough, and it wasn't great. We know that. But do people really think that Eliot Wolf is going to go rogue and he's going to be like, who was the guy when Ronald Reagan was shot? Was it Asa Hutchinson or somebody? I'm in charge now. Do they really think Eliot Wolf is going to bust into doors on draft night? He's gonna take the microphone, and be like, we're drafting this person and like holding off Mike Vrabel and Ryan Cowden and Stretch and all these guys, and they're going to be holding him back, and he's going to be like, no, I'm fine. This is who the pick's going to be. Like, what are we talking about here? I mean, it's just to me, it's utterly ridiculous.
Yeah.
These people are all adults. They all have a ton of experience. They know what they're doing. There's going to be a consensus on just about everything. And when there isn't, Vrabel is going to get his way. Like, can we all just move it down to DEFCON 5 or whatever? Like, everybody just needs to relax. Eliot Wolf does not have his finger on the nuclear football for the Patriots personnel transactions. Just relax, take a breath. Let's see how they do with this process. And I think, look, a lot of people like Eliot Wolf. You might, Beetle might think he's a complete imbecile. That's fine. I can tell you that 99% of the people in the NFL don't. And he has a lot of respect. He's going to work well with Cowden and all these guys, and they are going to get the personnel back on track for the New England Patriots.
It's so funny that you said relax, because that's exactly how I handled it on my podcast yesterday. So I understand people. Some people are going to lose their minds because Eliot Wolf has now become just like a trigger name. As soon as it's brought up, it's like, oh my God, he can't do anything right. Take a deep breath, calm down, and think about this realistically, and think about relationships, and think about, the leverage that Vrabel had, all the stuff we've talked about leading into the combine, everything we've discussed, nothing has changed. Eliot Wolf can go out there and say, I ultimately have the final say. I have personnel power in my contract, whatever he says. When you lock the door and you're sitting there and it's Eliot Wolf, Ryan Cowden, and Mike Vrabel as the top three in the front office, as we said from the very beginning, especially when Cowden came in within like the first 12 hours of Vrabel officially being the guy, it's like Vrabel was hired. The ink wasn't even dry on his contract, and Ryan Cowden was sitting next to him in an office. Like, just think about it realistically with some common sense and how these relationships work. And as Greg said, there's no way on God's green earth that Eliot Wolf would walk into that draft room on that Thursday night and they're sitting there with the fourth pick, and Mike Vrabel says, hypothetically, I want Will Campbell. There's no way. There is no way that Eliot Wolf would look at Mike Vrabel in the eyes and say, sorry, Mike, we're going to draft Mason Graham. There's no way. There's just no way. There's no way. They handed the keys to Vrabel. This is not tough. What happens is, and we've gone through this, but I'll go through it one more time. Eliot Wolf has done the legwork on this draft, on the free agency class, along with the front office. Vrabel comes in, Cowden comes in. They have their own thoughts about the class, but especially Vrabel, he does not have a voluminous, book on everybody that's in this draft. That's everybody in the free agency class. He doesn't have it. He hasn't studied hundreds of guys like the front office has. And so what happens is Mike Vrabel walks in and says, Eliot, this is what I'm looking for. At defensive line, I want this. At defensive end, I want this. And he goes through the positions and he tells you what his vision of a football player and the profile at each of those positions. Eliot Wolf takes that information. He goes back to the front office staff. They start combing through more film. They do what they have to do. They do the legwork while Vrabel is doing some other things within the organization, like, setting up his program. And then as they get to a certain point, they sit down with Vrabel and they hand him information about the people that they think fit his profile the best at each position. Mike will take that information along with Ryan Cowden being a significant player in this, maybe even Stretch. He will sit down with his guys. He will look at the film. He will take his notes, and he will go back with the thought process of, this is who I like or love in this draft. This is who I like or love in this free agency. And it is then the job of Eliot Wolf to let Mike know We have a better chance to get this guy, blah, 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 blah. And then inevitably, Wolf tells Mike what they're going to do, and Mike gives the thumbs up or the John McCain thumbs down. It's as simple. That's how this works. So it doesn't matter what Eliot Wolf says. Apologies to Eliot, but it just doesn't matter. That's the process. And I think, Greg, last word on this, and I know I've gone a little long, but I wanted to explain from beginning to end how this thing works for the people that haven't listened to us and heard that part of it. The final thing I'll say is this, and this is not a slap to anybody in the media. It's just not. People have only so much time to review so many things and read things and watch things, and they have families and they have full-time jobs. But when you talk about this kind of stuff like front office structure and salary cap, and there's a lot of minutia, there's a lot of context, there's a lot of nuance. And, sports radio, I've done it for a long time, doesn't always major in context or nuance. So if you want to know the true process, soup to nuts, it might be not great for some people. They might be like, oh, you kidding me? You're going to tell me the step by step. But if you want that kind of thing, these are the shows that you want to watch and listen to, because Greg and I will go through some of that nuance and context. So that's what I think is why it's covered in certain ways by other people, because they don't really have the necessary time to go through it all.
Right. And that's why I go on like Felger and Maz the other day, and somebody calls in about Matt Groh, and I tell you, don't worry about Matt Groh. And Felger says, don't tell us what not to worry about. I'll tell you, because I know, unlike you, Felger, talking out of your rear end, I actually know what's going on. I actually know, who's important and who's not. And Matt Groh, not important. Robin Glazer, not important. Eliot Wolf saying he has final say, not important. And by the way, I did want to admit this. I wanted to come clean. Considering what's going on at the combine. I can now reveal the real reason I did not go to the combine. I was scared. It's scary out there for reporters. There are now brawls. There are now confrontations at Starbucks. There was one between Jordan Schultz and Ian Rapoport. I was told that Jay Glazer, wanted to meet me at St. Elmo's and had an issue with me. So I was not going to do that. It's tough out there. It's the rough streets, rough tunnels of Indianapolis. I can't go there anymore. It's too rough for me.
The tunnels of Indy, the tunnels are talking, Greg. The tunnels are talking. If you don't know what Greg's talking about, Jordan Schultz of Fox and Rapoport apparently got into a little bit of a, I wouldn't even call it a kerfuffle because there was no physicality, but at a Starbucks.
It wasn't.
I respect Ian Rapoport and the work he does, but there's no doubt Schultz would have the reach and height advantage.
Yeah.
What's delicious, no pun intended, about the story is that it happened at a Starbucks, and of course, Jordan Schultz, for the people that don't know, his dad was like the head of Starbucks. So
yeah.
And they got
court advantage. Home court advantage.
The barista jumped over the counter and gave Rapoport some shit.
Tag team. The baristas were involved.
The custodian came in with a mop and took Ian out at the knees. Apparently, there were some F-bombs, maybe, sort of, kind of. Us back and forth.
Mean streets, man. It's tough out there for a pimp.
By the way, shout out to Adam Schefter, who tweeted out this morning a picture of the Starbucks sign and posted head on a swivel.
Dude, why do you think I've been back in the gym for 2 months? I'm in training. I'm in training for the NFL offseason.
We could only send thoughts and prayers and hope for the best for Mike Giardi, who's out there braving it, and hopefully he comes back in one piece. All right, let's get to some other stuff. Devon Godchaux. He was given permission to seek a trade, Greg. Just your reaction to this.
Yeah, not surprising. I'm pretty sure we talked about it on here at one point when, looking a little bit more what Vrabel likes to do, how they might transform things. Terrell Williams being the defensive coordinator, Mike talking about being aggressive. Didn't seem to be much of a place for a two-gapping run stuffer. I mean, good player, but I just don't think he fits what the Patriots want to do. And, this is not surprising.
Speaking of getting permission to talk to other teams about a trade, Harold Landry is now available. Would you be interested if you were Vrabel and company?
Yeah, it depends on how much you're giving up. I know everybody's going like nuts with these trades. They want the Patriots to do 4 or 5 trades. That's great and all, but I really don't want to be giving up too many draft picks. They have a lot of work to do. They have a lot of work to build up the younger depth on this team. And, maybe certainly one, maybe 2. Landry, look, good player, knows how to play in the scheme. Vrabel obviously knows him very well. I don't know. I kind of look at this year's draft and I see a bunch of Harold Landrys out there. So why not just draft your own guy, do what you did with Harold Landry before, and now you have him under, contract control. So, it really depends on what you're giving up and whether you need to sign him to a new contract or whatnot. But I'd rather just draft a kid and get him going.
I'd be fine with doing both, depending, as you said, on the return. And I think you brought up a great point, Greg. And this is something that I've mentioned on my podcast, and I mentioned it on 98.5 last weekend. This draft, everybody's kind of wrapped up in this draft, and it's not a good draft. But it's not a sexy draft, but there's quality in this draft, and there's really, really, really good depth. And I mean depth as in guys that can eventually start and maybe even start somewhat early on in year one of their career on the defensive line. So I think because of that, Greg, and there's also some depth at free agency at defensive edge. And you've got guys like Jonathan Allen, who's now available on the inside, Godchaux, who's now available on the inside. I think that's going to significantly suppress Harold Landry's market. So I would have to imagine that, everybody in the NFL is like what you just said. Am I going to give up a 3rd-round pick for Harold Landry when I feel like I can draft a guy who's 22 years old and not 28 and probably give me at least some of what Landry can give me? So I don't think it would cost too much. I really don't think it would cost too much. And I would be fine sending a day 3 pick for Landry and investing in the defensive line in the draft. And that way you don't feel like you have all the pressure on the guy you drafted to make a difference in year one, which is, something that I think Eliot Wolf was kind of telling us about Jalen Polk during his press conference yesterday, which was we put too much on the young man because they really wanted him to be, I think, the number 1 receiver. And that was a lot to ask of him. Pat Stewart, we talked about the offense, the front office, rather, Greg, earlier with the structure. Pat Stewart is now gone. He's leaving to go to Nebraska to be Nebraska's GM. We're seeing this a lot, by the way. Guys from the NFL leaving the NFL to become GMs of college programs with NIL and a lot of stuff happening. We saw your guy, Jim Nagy, from the Senior Bowl. He took a position at Oklahoma similar to this. Just your thoughts about Stewart leaving the front office.
Yeah, I think it's to me, it was shocking. It's sneaky big news. Now, he is the pro personnel director for the Patriots, and his busy season was just about to start. I mean, free agency and all that, that's his realm. He's in charge of that department. So from what I understand, he's leaving next week. So before I was wondering if he might stay through, free agency, maybe leave before the draft, but he's leaving next week, which is shocking to me. My initial impression before talking to people was this could be, all these people fretting about who's in charge and blah, blah, blah. One could read this as Pat Stewart being like, Vrabel's now in charge. I don't really know him that well. I don't know how much of a future I have here. Matt Rule, who I've known since, I want to say at least 2002. I think they were together at Western Carolina and then Temple. Matt Rule brought Pat to the Carolina Panthers when he was head coach. So they have a long history, and I don't think Matt Rule's going anywhere at Nebraska. So, probably you could look at it and say Pat Stewart's just like, I don't know if I have much of a future in New England. I know I have a future at Nebraska. From what I've been told since, that's not the case. That this is just simply too good of an offer to pass up for Pat Stewart and his family. I think he's really good. It's a loss. I'll be interested to see how the Patriots do it. I mean, Ryan Cowden, we know he's there and he's going to be involved. Most of his background is in college scouting. I'm sure he can do pro personnel. The Patriots have an assistant pro personnel. His name escapes me.
It begins with an F. His last name begins with an F. I know that.
Yeah, it's like Sam Fioroni. He's assistant director of pro personnel. So, I think Alonzo Highsmith could do that job as well. But certainly interesting timing. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, maybe it could be Highsmith taking that gig.
I can't see it being Matt Groh. Matt Groh's more of a college. He's been all college the whole time. I mean, I guess he could, but, then again, I don't think Groh has much of a future here in any event.
All right, Greg's got some what I think is pretty critical intel on somebody the Patriots might be interested in this offseason. But before we get to that intel, Greg wants to give you the info on Prizepicks.
Prizepicks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, Prizepicks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least two players for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. Run your game all season long on Prizepicks. Love the app. It's awesome. It's fast. I just sit there, watch the games, and then root for it. I might have to, look at what they have for my Scarlet Knights tonight before I sit down and watch that game against Michigan at 9 o'clock. Prizepicks invented the flex play, which means you can still cash out if your lineup isn't perfect. You can double your money, even if one of your picks doesn't hit. Think Jason Tatum will get more than 5 3-pointers in the next game? Jaylen Brown for more than 35 points? Cook up your Nick Cattles-ish hot takes with your friends and win real money this basketball season when you and your crew run your game on Prizepicks. Which players are going off, which ones aren't? Make your picks in less than 60 seconds and turn your sports opinions into real money all season long on Prizepicks. Download the app today and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, that's code CLNS to get $50 instantly. Prizepicks, run your game.
So Bedard was in the kitchen, and he was cooking up some intel. He's cooking up some big intel for everybody. We've been discussing arm length. I don't know if this is going to, stop being discussed because of, the offensive line needs and all that stuff. And the person we've talked a lot about is Will Campbell, and whether or not his arm measurements measure at 33 inches. He's going to measure, by the way, on Sunday. So Sunday we will get the official NFL Combine word on Campbell's arm length. But Greg actually got some intel, and apparently Will Campbell got measured last year. And Greg, you tell us what that measurement was.
Yeah, so I was, I'd asked a few people and didn't hear anything. Like I got height and weight on Will Campbell from last spring, but no arm length, and it was bugging me. Did he not measure his arms, or what's the deal? So then I reached out to a better source who would definitely know. Checked, got back to me. Will Campbell's arm length on precisely, I think it was April 2nd, 2024, was 32 inches and 7/8, which I was actually, I didn't think he was going to get the 33. I mean, maybe he will on Sunday. Maybe he's been, hanging, Bobby Brady-ish, hanging from the swing. or maybe that's what he's doing at the Starbucks while journalists are fighting in Indy. But as long as, put it into context, remember, we talked about Vrabel drafted Peter Skoronski 11th overall, and they had the idea, I think they wanted him to play tackle, and he was 32.25 inches. I think Alaric Jackson, who we've been talking about, the Rams, 32.5 inches. So 32 and 7/8, that's actually that's pretty damn close. I would feel, I don't know about a 4, but certainly maybe in the top 10-ish, I would feel better about it. Remember Joe Tooney, who struggled in the Super Bowl against Josh Sweat and his 35-inch go-go gadget arms. Joe Tooney, 32.25 inches. So that he's almost a 33. I think that's a good result for him.
If you think Will Campbell can play tackle, there's no way that I would let 1/8 of an inch separate drafting him from not draft. There's just no way. I'm sorry. I get if it's like 32.5, 32.25, but 1/8 of an inch. I'm sorry. That to me is like, all right, now we're really, really, really splitting hairs. If we're looking at 32 7/8 versus 33 inches. If you think he can play it, if he's athletic enough, if his technique is good enough. Now, I know there's some other, concerns, and I know his last name escapes me. His first name is Rick. His last name begins with S. He writes for you at BSJ, Greg. He's your draft guy.
Oh, Rick Saratella.
Yeah. So Rick.
Yeah, I saw you guys fighting on Twitter.
No. It wasn't a fight. Come on. This was not Schultz Rapoport style. I put out the idea of like the arm length or whatever, and some story came out, and Rick replied and said like he thinks he's a guard, and he mentioned Robert Gallery, who was the gigantic guard who played for the Raiders years ago. And so I asked Rick, was it just the arm length that made him feel like Campbell was a guard, or was it something else? And Rick brought up, and he's not the only one that's brought this up, that Campbell gets beat by speed rushers at times, especially when they go to the inside. So again, if you, and I'm not an O-line guru, I lean on Greg, I lean on, Evan Lazar and Brendan Thorne and some of these guys. I can't sit here and tell you the intricacies of the difference of tackle, guard, and what. But if you feel like he can play tackle, I mean, the guy gave up like 3 sacks in the SEC his entire career. If you feel like he can play tackle, then again, 1/8 of an inch is not going to change my opinion about that. Let's talk about Travis Hunter. He spoke with the media today. He is one of, it feels like 50 dudes who are not going to work out at the combine, unfortunately. He's not going to be doing drills, so put him on the list. But Hunter said, Greg, that he wants to play both cornerback and receiver 100% of the time. Now, I don't even want to talk about that because you have discussed this and others have at length. There's no way he's going to play both 100% of the time. There's no way. The key thing that he said to me was that it would be up to the organization. So that feels, Greg, to me, like Hunter is not meeting with these teams. And he might be just saying that to say it and look good optically. But if he's taking that approach inside the room when he interviews with teams, that tells me he's not dictating to the team what he wants to play. He's leaving that up to the team. Does that kind of change your thought process if you're the Patriots? And do you just say, all right, we think he's a receiver and he's apparently open to playing receiver 100% of the time? Like, how does that change the conversation that it doesn't seem like he's dictating the what's going to happen with him?
Yeah, I just think it goes to, what we've sort of heard about Travis Hunter is that, the kid's a really good kid. He's team first. He loves football. To me, that's a big check mark. That like we're not getting some diva in here. Like it's not going to be like Deion Sanders being like, this is what I'm going to do, and I want to play both ways, a few times and kick returns. Like he's going to do what the team wants, and I think that's a good thing.
One more note about Will Campbell. I just want to bring this back. I wrote the note down, forgot to mention it. He has been training at tackle, which should tell you that he's gotten some information that he can play tackle. He believes he's a tackle. I'm sure teams have told him they think he's a tackle through back channels. So he has been training at tackle. And that should also tell us that he's at least close to go along with Greg's intel to 33-inch arm length. One last draft note before we get to some Patriots free agency stuff. Abdul Carter, stress reaction. He's not getting surgery. Any cause for concern?
I don't think so, even though this is the first time I've heard about a stress reaction. Isn't it like it's not yet a fracture? Is that what they're saying? But I mean, look, as long as the doctors sign off on it, I mean, I'd be a little bit worried. He's not going to get the surgery, so that means he's gonna test it as pro day. I mean, don't love it, but I don't think any of these guys are really, perfect coming out. But certainly something to monitor.
All right, we've got the latest about Tee Higgins and more to cover coming up. But first, Greg tells you about Notturno.
As someone who spent years covering football, I know what it takes to be a winning team, it's about reliability, precision, and showing up when it matters most. When it comes to my own home and my heating system, I needed a team I could count on, and Notturno Home Services delivered. Notturno is local. They are family-owned and family-focused and have been servicing the greater Boston area for over 15 years. From start to finish, they made the process of upgrading my heating system seamless and stress-free, and they go above and beyond. Can't say enough about their professionalism, timeliness, no issue getting people on the phone. Just great people over there at Notturno. Notturno isn't just about heating. They are my go-to for plumbing, cooling, and even water and air quality solutions. They've got the expertise to handle whatever your home needs. Here's the best part. You can get 10% off your next service with Notturno. That could save you up to $1,000 on your next project. Just visit notturnohome.com/Bedard for all details and conditions. That's Notturno home.com/Bedard. Take advantage now. These deals won't last forever. If you're looking for a team that puts your comfort first, visit notturnohome.com/Bedard. I trust Notturno, and you should too.
You want to check out Greg Bedard, who you should trust with his Patriots coverage, BSJ, $50 for the year, along with Mike Giardi. And also want to remind you about our friends at Prizepicks. Check out that app today. Use the code CLNS. Get $50 instantly when you play $5. So download Prizepicks today. Before we get to Tee Higgins, apparently in between fisticuffs, Jordan Schultz just reported a little while ago that Mike Green is going to skip drills at the combine. And I know I kind of mentioned this jokingly a minute ago, but now I feel like I got to ask you the question. Like, how much does this impact teams' plans? A lot, a little, not at all? Because, of course, you still have pro days, but, I mean, there's just a slew of guys. And Green is saying it's because of hamstring tightness. I
have that every day.
Yeah. No shit. I just, the hamstring tightness thing I'm not buying. Some guys do have legitimate injuries, like Carter, a legitimate injury. But does this change the dynamics of the combine? Does it change some of the conversations that teams are having right now with like all of these guys deciding, you know what, I'm just going to wait until my pro day?
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, I guess it's possible for some teams. And by the way, speaking of measurements and news, I just saw that this is interesting. And I wondered how he was going to measure out. Mason Graham, who there's been a lot of talk about him being the Patriots pick at 4, which it could be.
Yeah.
His 6'3.5", 296 pounds. That's pretty light. For an interior guy. Arm length 32 inches. Not great. I thought his arms were going to be short. That's not great. And 9 1/8 hands. Not great either. Your interior guys, I mean, you'd love to get some good arm length, some big mitts. And I think as we go forward in this whole draft process, I think the Graham evaluation is going to be interesting because there's no doubt that he dominated on the college level. He was just simply outstanding at Michigan. But, doing that in the NFL where guards are routinely 6'5" and 340 pounds, it might be something different. But, he could be special. I mean, look, Aaron Donald was a freaking midget and, one of the greatest interior guys ever. I mean, he was. Geno Atkins, too.
You got a vibe today. I like it. I think it's because you got up earlier than usual.
Yeah, I've been up way too long. I'm probably overtired at this point. Daddy needs a nap. Yeah.
The Mason Graham thing is going to be interesting. I heard Evan Lazar and Mike Dussault talking about this. And they said that, when he was up at the podium talking to teams, talking to the media, I don't know if they said these exact words, but this is what I took from it. He's not the most physically imposing guy, which is what the measurements would tell you too. Yep. And, usually it's not always the case. Okay. Aaron Donald was, as you put it, height challenged, right? I'll put it that way. He was challenged with the height. I'm height challenged. Greg is not height challenged, so he gets to shit on everybody else who's maybe a little shorter. I feel your pain, Aaron Donald, but I'm also not built like a truck like Aaron Donald. Aaron Donald was short, but that dude was a fire hydrant. Like he is just ripped to the gills and physically imposing. And it feels like he could lift two human beings up at the same time and throw them a significant distance across a room. So, if you got Mason Graham and you're dealing with this kind of stuff, it's interesting, as you mentioned, because you got to make that leap up to the NFL. And if he's not, physically long and he's not tall and he's not physically imposing, it doesn't mean he can't play at a high level. But, if you're talking top 5 pick, you usually know when a guy walks into the room, if you're talking defensive line, that, all right, he's no joke. So, and the measurements are coming in. Michael Williams is another guy you got to look at. Jordan Reed just tweeted out 6'5", 260, 34 3/8 inch arms, has hands of 10 1/4 inches. So, kind of stacks up to Danielle Hunter, taller than Danielle Hunter. So
Shamar Stewart is a man. He's 6'5", 267, 9 5/8 hands, 34 1/8 arm. And he lost weight from the Senior Bowl, so he is going to fly. And as long as he tests or works out, I don't know. Seems like everybody's going to walk out of this thing.
His wingspan is almost 85 inches.
Mm-hmm.
That seems to be pretty ridiculous. He's 6'5", and Michael Williams is 6'5", but he's at 84 3/4, and Michael is at 82 7/8. So that's a pretty impressive wingspan. Yeah. But anyway, enough of the measurements. I'm sure people are like, all right, let's get to Tee Higgins. Yeah. All right, we're going to get to Tee Higgins in a minute. But first, Chad Graff of The Athletic echoes what Greg told us a couple weeks back at the Senior Bowl, which is that the focus of this offseason is going to be the lines, the trenches, building from inside out. We've already talked about that. What I want to ask you about, Greg, though, is guard. Because everybody looks at this team and they say, all right, we know tackles. Mm-hmm. We know defensive line. They need help. Do you feel like they have urgency to also fill a spot or two at guard, given the roster?
I think they could. I mean, you certainly look at left guard, whether it's, is Cole Strange a center or not? Layden Robinson had some good moments, had some rough moments. And, like Eliot Wolf said the other day, they probably didn't expect him to play a whole lot this year, but he did. And I do think he has a bright future, but, when is that going to arrive? And I think, we've said this before, and I'll continue to say this as we go through. It's very difficult to bank on these college prospects on the offensive line coming in and being NFL average their first year. It just doesn't happen that much anymore. And so, Layden Robinson probably needs another year of development, which wouldn't be a bad thing. So I think that I would not be surprised if they look to add, a left guard just to get. I think they're just going to leave themselves more options all over the place, and that's tackle, that's guard, center. I doubt it. I mean, it depends what their evaluation is of Cole Strange on whether he can do it in the new system or not. Showed some promise last year. What's David Andrews' future? All of that stuff. But yeah, I think that's possible.
City So, I mean, it'll be interesting to see how this regime, how does Vrabel and Cowden feel about City So? Because it is a weird case last year. He was slated to be the starting left guard. I mean, when we were at camp, Greg, he started at left guard, I think, 11 straight practices to go along with Chooks and whoever the hell else it was at that point. And then you had a bunch of injuries, and So was one of those injuries. So I wonder how they feel about City So and where he kind of is placed into the mix. Chad Graff also says, Greg, that the Patriots are not going to pursue Tee Higgins if Higgins becomes available, of course. Are you surprised by that?
Yes and no. I think that they might be, playing possum a little bit, but I do, talking to some people this week, I think, and we sort of heard this from Eliot the other day, where he talked about, I couldn't really hear the question, but I think it was about basically the lessons learned from last year, and like basically not having enough information. And we've talked about this, where a guy like Chukwuefor, why do you screw that up? Because you didn't have anybody with background. You didn't know the player, and we've talked about how this staff, you have so many people who've come from different places. There is just a plethora of information that they have on a lot of guys who are available, and I do think that the Patriots are a little bit leery of extending themselves too much for players that they don't know. And I think Tee Higgins is one of those guys. And you look at his injury history and all that. Like, are you going to pay him more than Justin Jefferson? I do think that there's some apprehension about that in the organization. Now, whether that continues or not all the way through, we'll see. But I do think the trade market might be where they focus their attention.
Yeah, and that's part of Graf's report as well, is that the Patriots are going to be looking at the trade market. They've already started to kind of plant some seeds at the combine this week. And, according to Graf, they don't believe as he writes, the free agent class, they know this free agent class isn't great. Same goes for the top end of this draft class. So to improve at the position, they could turn to the trade market. So, and who that could be, we could go through names. We won't today, but that certainly sounds like that's what they're going to do. Since you brought this up, the experience that some of these guys have with relationships with players that are going to be available, how much would you let that, if you're Vrabel, Greg, how much do you let that impact your decision making? Because Tony Pauline, for example, of Sportskeeda comes out and he says Milton Williams, who is the defensive lineman for Philadelphia, had a really good year, a talented guy. He's going to make upwards of $20 million a year. Are you passing up on a Milton Williams at that kind of price bracket or what price level? If you don't have personal experience with the guy, or don't feel like you have a really good feel as to who he is, like where does the split happen from talent to knowing the guy?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it's all a mix. I mean, I think these guys really start with their evaluation. They always go back to their evaluation of these guys coming out in the draft, and they do a lot of background on what makes the guy tick, and it starts there. I do think if he was iffy coming into the draft as far as motivation, like really what we're talking about is these guys, and it's not just Milton Williams. We talk about all these guys. How are they going to react when they get their big contract? Are they going to? I mean, look at Michael Wenu. He showed up out of shape. It took him a while to get back into shape. I mean, is that who he is or what? So it depends on. I think they rely on their evaluation going into the draft, and then seeing if anything's changed. They can reach out to some players, but I do think it's a factor. I do.
Last one for today. The Patriots finished 31st out of 32 teams on the NFLPA report card. How much does it matter?
It doesn't. Another popular sports talk radio topic, and it's right up their alley. And good job by the NFLPA, and good timing on when they should actually release it, like before combine. A little bit more dead time. I mean, look, does it reflect great on the crafts? No. Do I hope somebody gives Robert the report, before the league meetings this time? Like last year, we talked to him at the league meetings. It was like, yeah, I had no idea about this stuff. Like, is anybody telling him anything? Jonathan's probably hiding it from him. Don't show this to the old man. Like, we're trying to save a few bucks. Look, I like it. It keeps them honest. I don't think it's not a big deal. I mean, the Patriots are building a new facility. We know that that's going to be good.
Yep.
The travel thing, a lot of it, I think, is a bunch of players complaining. The grades overall aren't that bad. I mean, an F on the Patriots travel, is it really that bad? I mean, I hear Zolak, travels on all these things. He says that it's great. And I do think you were talking about players who are getting younger and younger and more entitled and more spoiled. And, is everything great? No. Is it a disaster? No. Do I think it's going to prevent anybody from signing with the Patriots? Hell no. And so really, it doesn't. I don't really care all that much about it. But the Crafts do have to step up, and they've been held accountable, and let's see them continue to improve.
All right, we're out of here. We'll talk to you early next week. I'm sure we'll have even more news over the weekend. It's a very busy time of the year. Greg's on the phone, texting, calling people. And again, if anything breaks, I'm sure we'll be all over it as well. And we'll talk to you soon.